There was a man who lived in Jesus' day who caught leprosy. Started as a few white spots on his body which he hid under his clothes. When a few more appeared, he became afraid. They showed up on his face. People saw them and told him to go and show himself to the priest. That's what the scripture said he should do. If leprosy was found, he would go on a register as unclean, and they'd send him into quarantine. This man feared the worst that day. He entered that synagogue with a name, a family, a home, a career, a reputation and a future. He left with all those gone. He was officially labelled unclean. From that day on, the only thing anyone knew him by was leper. He was required to wear torn clothes and to warn anybody who came near him by calling out, "Unclean, unclean!" He could not return to his home. He had to leave his job, and his future was sickness and death. This was a terrible situation. A man can't live without hope. In the leper colony, he began to search for hope where every good Jew looks, in the scriptures, and what he discovered there did little to calm his fears. Moses has ordered anyone with leprosy out of the camp, unclean. The disease had been a punishment for Moses' sister Miriam for her disobedience. The servant of the great prophet Elijah had got into lying and greed, and he was punished with leprosy. And so too King Uzziah, who had unlawfully done what only the priest should do, and he contracted leprosy and he died of it. Well, this man's heart grew sad. If high status people got punished, so would a common person like him. Was his infection a punishment too? If so, what had he done? Was he worse than anyone else? He had a lot of time to think. He did find in the scriptures references to a Messiah, and one sign of his being Messiah would be the healing of diseases. This caught his imagination. If Messiah came, he saw him with an incurable disease, he could touch him, cure him, and everyone would know that he was Messiah. No, stop it. Go back to reality. No, reality is too hopeless. Toggle back to denial and dreamland again. It felt good just for a few moments. He found it difficult to get local news because he was supposed to keep social distancing from healthy people. Then he heard a rumour about a man called Jesus from Galilee who was healing people. Was it true? He had to find out. He had nothing to lose, nothing that is, except rejection from hostile people not wanting to get infected from his disease. But when a man is doomed anyway, there's nothing to lose. He followed the gossip trail and found where Jesus was. Well, that was the easy bit. A lot of people were surrounding him, each one repulsed by a leper, like him. And that was just a social barrier. And then there was a mental barrier. Why should someone as popular as Jesus be interested in me? He'd endured years of put-downs. Go away, get lost, unclean. Round and round in his head, this programming shouted at him to give up. It's no use. You're a loser. Why bother? Well, then another thought came to him. Why not bother? You got nothing to lose. Many times he'd rehearsed what he would do if he ever got close to Jesus. Begging for alms was his specialty. He had skills at begging. And then more doubts would flood in. If the priests have nothing but a cursed label to offer him, what would a holy man like Jesus have to say? Even God himself would be known to use leprosy to curse sinners. There's no use delaying any more, just go for it. He planned his approach. He'll wait along the road outside the synagogue where Jesus is. He waits. A crowd begins to swell along the road, coming his way. Jesus is with them. He musters up courage. Go for it. Be bold. He hobbles out onto the path, and crowd members start jeering and shouting at him to get away. He ignores them. He wants to be healed. He sits in the direct line of Jesus, and then a funny thing happens. The crowd part either side of him to avoid contact. It's the first time in his life that being a leper had given him an advantage. And then he appeared straight in front of him. Jesus. He dropped to his knees and he started begging. If you are willing, you can make me clean, he says. Time stands still. After all his planning, this is all he has to say for himself. nothing. He feels totally exposed here. The whole crowd focus their rejection on him, utterly humiliating. He's breaking every taboo about lepers. Jesus stops and he looks straight at him. He dares to look up in his face. And what he sees is even better than his escape dreams. There's no judgment, no criticism, no rejection, no repulsion on his smiling face. A deep compassion seems to come from way down from his beautiful heart, showing up through his beaming face. And Jesus reaches out his hand towards him, and he moves his head to avoid being touched. No one ever wants to touch a leper, but Jesus' hand follows him, and then he touched him. Skin on skin. Skin on leprous skin. His on mine. And Jesus speaks. I am willing, he says. Be clean. This is no dream. This is real. This man's lonely, cold heart warms up with some sweet love. Not only his heart, but his skin. He looks down and it's clean. He's cured. It all happened so quickly. Suddenly, his skin is restored. And not just his skin, his aching, empty heart is filled with warm acceptance coming out of the heart of Jesus. It's beautiful. Just for a moment, he is cured. He is free from leprosy. He can go back to his old life, to his home, his good standing in the community. He can go back to all he's missed, and all he's longed for can be his again. But wait. Jesus, who cured him, has something else to say. He says to him, firm but kind, see to it that you don't tell this to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. Immediately a crossroads is put before this man. His own instinct is to shout aloud to everyone that he's healed, to draw attention to himself, to go from zero to hero, and get back what he's lost as fast as he can. But with the same authority that Jesus had spoken to heal him, he orders him back to the priest. He doesn't want to go there. They've got his name on their registrar of lepers. It's a long procedure, queuing up, waiting turn, getting inspected. It's embarrassing. And then offering an animal sacrifice just like Moses ordered. That's messy. It'll take time. He can do it himself. He doesn't need all this long process. What should he do? He's on a high. He just wants to shout it out. This voice of command from Jesus has another way, a conventional way, a formal procedure for being declared free from leprosy. He looks for an excuse. What if the priest is ungodly? Jesus doesn't allow for any such excuse. Well, what a choice. His way or Jesus' way. He didn't understand then, but Jesus had a good reason for him going through the priest visit process. For one reason, Scripture required it. He needed to obey Scripture. And secondly, his visit would give the priest a chance to learn about Jesus and to see his power on the man that he'd inspected before. Then he too could have a chance to believe. He was to be a witness to Jesus. And a third reason for going through this long process was to provide Jesus with more time in that district. When crowds pressed too closely around him, he could no longer work effectively. Leaving the scene to visit the priest would put him out of the limelight and allow Jesus to work in his community. But the most important reason was that this man not return to his old life, but begin a new life, a life of obedience to Jesus as master. Unfortunately, he went his own way. He went out and began to talk freely to whoever he met and tell them all about his being healed. He quickly became the talk of the town. Who did it? It was Jesus. And they rushed to see Jesus in greater numbers. And as a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly. He had to stay outside in lonely places. Well, that man spoiled Jesus' work in his own community. Later he realized that Jesus had far more to give him than a healthy body. Jesus had a narrow road of obedience for him in mind. By going his way about advertising his own health, he was saying no to Jesus' way of obedience. He wanted his old life back, but Jesus had a new life for him. He wanted to avoid protocols, but Jesus affirmed those processes. He wanted a healthy body, but Jesus wanted an obedient soul. He wanted to go public, but Jesus wanted him to stay in private for a while. He wanted instant gratification, but Jesus' way was a process over time. It's a wonder Jesus bothered to heal him at all, but he did. That man's disobedience hindered him there, but he just went on to the next place and continued God's work of redeeming more people like the man who developed leprosy.